Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks so much for joining this next episode of In the Nick of Time. We have some amazing guests today with Ryan and Andrew coming from the tag team to tell us a little bit about how their team has been able to innovate and bring tremendous value to the warfighter for years now when it comes to their product and their ability to deliver capabilities that is used by hundreds of thousands of warfighter across pretty much the entire landscape of theaters. So this is going to be a very interesting conversation to try to see what is the recipe for success. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you a couple of things. Of course, if you've not checked out some of the videos we published every week, do that in the learnwithnick.com. We have obviously a free trial, but also 50% off for civilian, military, and even veterans. And of course, 20% off for everybody else with the coupon code Let's Beat China. So check that out. If you missed it, we have pushed a Uber hack, what we know and lessons learned video a few days after the hack, with insights coming directly from the hacker and really kind of diving into the ability of the malicious actor to laterally move to the crown jewel and how they've done that, which kind of pushed us to do another video after that and deep dive on the glass accounts, which effectively is how the malicious actor managed to escalate privilege and get to the crown jewel. So we did a video because we couldn't really find anything online really doing a good job at describing both what all the break glass accounts, how to use it right, and how to protect them as well. So check that out if you missed it. Both of these videos are completely free on the channel. We also, thanks to you and more than 90,000 views and 250 comments, released the top 20 books of 2022. If you've not checked the list, you need to do that. There's a couple of books that are essential to your growth, personal growth, but also if you have missed more recently, the book called The War with Our Rules from Charles Spalding is doing a very good job at showing why the United States is already at war with China. It's just a great book that really summarizes very well what China has been doing for 20 plus years to infiltrate both our education system, companies, and effectively get a tremendous set of key capabilities and technology innovations to compete and fight back and take the lead in 2050 compared to the United States. So this is a great book to check out. Last thing before we get started, wanted to remind everybody we're going to be launching next month a pretty unique new capability. It's going to be completely free, so you're going to need to check that out. But it's going to be effectively a metaverse on laptops, mobile, cloud native town, we call it, which will be the first world's first cloud native metaverse community. We're going to have effectively CNCF companies on there, a lot of training videos, releases about new products, new capabilities. You're going to be able to go and join keynotes and listen to speakers. You're going to have fun games, effectively dedicated rooms to have discussions about things like Kubernetes and Service Mesh and cyber and so on. So it's going to be pretty exciting to see. With the subscribers and Learn with Nick, thousands of people will be able to come and chat, engage, and have access to our content. Of course, all the videos will be there, so you can walk around and get to see different content. So it's going to be fun. So we're looking for ambassador to help us kind of make sure that no one is doing stupid stuff in there. So we're going to probably get 20. We have about 13 now, so we need 7 more ambassador. So if you're interested, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Also, we have a lot of CNCF companies already giving us their content videos and information to push their content on the metaverse. But if you know companies that will be interested to push their stuff on the platform, reach out to us as well. All right. So now I wanted to, of course, introduce the TAC team. We have two amazing guests today, so that's going to be fun. Ryan and Andrew. So Ryan is the director of the TAC Product Center. As a director, he leads the team of expert technologists and he's empowering 3,000 developers and 350,000 military civilians and international users. The technical baseline, uh, effectively is empowered by TAC for 18 U.S. government program of record that enables multiple active foreign military sales cases. It's a key component of every combat theater. He has a computer degree, computer engineer by degree, and he's a seasoned executive and loves delighting users. Who doesn't? Andrew is a site reliability engineer, and for people that don't know, maybe what a site reliability engineer is, check out that video. We do a pretty good job at kind of giving a quick rundown of SREs. Came from Google, and so if you don't know what that job entails, that's probably the future of operation teams. So check it out. SREs are a key piece of your DevSecOps teams. So Andrew is SRE at the TAC Product Center, and since 2019, he has been leading the architecture and implementation of the TAC developer platform, empowering those engineers to ship world-class software in a continuous, consistent, reliable, and secure manner. Before joining TAC, he engineered cutting-edge, first-to-market projects for distributed analytics at leading technology and research organizations. In his spare time, he maintains packages for Arch Linux and enjoys going on hikes. So he's multifaceted, just like Ryan. So it's going to be fun to have them. We're going to bring them on the screen now and welcome them. Ryan, Andrew, welcome on the show.
Pleasure. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have you. You guys are actually bringing tremendous value, tangible value, right? A lot of people have pretty amazing numbers. I was very good at bloating my own achievements in DoD, but you guys are doing the opposite. You're over delivering and bringing tremendous value to teams across the government and many FYEY partners and other federal agencies. So it's going to be interesting to do a deep dive with you on the how, because people argue that what you're doing is impossible in the U.S. government, and yet you've proved them wrong. And so that's going to be an interesting discussion. First, before we get started, I always ask the same question of everybody. So we're going to start with Ryan, and then we'll go to Andrew. But tell us a little bit about your journey.
Sure. I have ended up in the TAC ecosystem by accident twice now. I showed up at Air Force Research Laboratory back in 2013 as a punk second lieutenant. I showed up, they said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I can code." And they said, "We have this new thing called ATAC, and we just need another developer on it. So have you done Android?" "No." "Have you done Java?" "Yeah, I've been doing Java since high school." So they said, "Great, that'll work. Go learn Android, and we'll do some stuff." And so did some stuff. Took a bit of a detour that has been really foundational for me. So I was selected to be kind of a detachment commander liaison officer as a first lieutenant for this program, this experimental UAS program from AFRL. So went over to Afghanistan, led that for 6 months. And that was my first real exposure to SOCOM. So up until that point for me, like SOCOM was this kind of mystical entity, and a lot of secrecy around it for good reason. But as a command, I got to start to understand, like from being there on the forward operating base, how the command operates, how it runs operations, and then also spent just as a person, like 6 months embedded with an airborne infantry battalion. So that was really unique, because by the end of that, I had seen some of the technology gaps. I had come from the ATAC branch. ATAC was not a program of record anywhere. And the UAS we were flying over there had seen some systems integration improvements as well with mesh networking radios. So came back, was able to deliver pretty quickly some new capabilities for that UAS with pushing electronic warfare information from the aircraft overhead down to the notional ATAC user on the ground over a wave relay radio. That's kind of when I got it. Like before that, I didn't get it. And then, like that stuff came together technically, in terms of the user being out with them. And at that point, like I could say I kind of got it. So I spent a lot of time with that community with UAS, developing plugins for ATAC. And then I also spent quite a bit of time knowing the fires community. So I think I was the first acquisitions person to go through the JTAC qualification course. And that again was foundational because I actually started, getting like controls, directed strikes to kind of under my belt. If you were to come over over me on an aircraft on the radio, I would tell you I'm not a JTAC, but I can be helpful because it's actually required by doctrine. And so I spent some time in industry doing more tax stuff. Didn't really expect to, but it kind of worked out that way. Spent time back on orders. So I'm still in the reserves. I'm a major in the Air Force Reserve, doing software and flight tests, kind of where those two come together. Just pretty cool projects right now with the A-10 and the F-15C. So two platforms that aren't particularly popular with the Air Force. We're able to move quickly in some respects. So that's pretty cool. Ended up back on the federal side about, I don't know, a little over a year ago. I knew I wanted to come back on the federal side. Would like to get a PhD at some point, and being a federal civilian is a good opportunity to do that. And again, the second time, just by accident, ended up back in the TAC world. So when I started doing TAC, it was not a product center. Like there was just people doing things at the research lab. Over time, would transition into multiple programs of record. So by the time I came back to federal government last year, there was a change in leadership, and I just happened to be literally right place, right time, right person, and have found myself leading this incredible and lean team at the TAC Product Center. So we're a U.S. government organization where we're all of us are steeped in our craft, whether that's like kind of organizational leadership, TAC development, TAC users, or like site reliability engineering with Andrew, foreign military sales cases. There's definitely a deep expertise required to execute those. From the government side, or just finance. Like we have to be really good at finance because we manage our own finances. We have to be really good at cybersecurity because we steward TAC.gov ourselves. Like there's no backstop. We implement cutting edge practices, technologies to do that. But we're very much an empowered organization that's kind of 1 degree removed from the POM. And as I'm sure we'll get into, there's good and not so good aspects to that, but we tend to focus on the good and then operate within our means. So we exist to empower the TAC user, whether that's a developer, an operator. It kind of fits with where my personal career has gone too, is like, building software organizations, achieve flow within this really complex, tightly regulated space of the DoD. And here we are. We'll get more into TAC Product Center, kind of how we do what we do, but that's how I got to where I am.
Yeah, that's so exciting, and we're lucky we have people like you in the reserve to be able to do what you do. So let's bring now Andrew, and I'm gonna move him up for him to be able to tell him a little bit about his journey too.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that, Nick. Yeah, so really, I joined the team in 2019, right when the Tech Product Center was being established, and basically was tasked with migrating the existing services that developers were using from a contracting company to our own GovCloud space, and orchestrating that, and then really growing it from there, so that we can continue to support our growth and the trajectory with that. But yeah, it's really been a lot of automation, is what I would say. Automating the things that need to be automated, so that we can continue to not be bogged down in toil, for example. Understanding, where it makes sense for things to be self-service versus a little bit more hands-on from the Tech Product Center staff side. But yeah, it's been interesting and exciting, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I wish more people in DoD would understand what toil even means, right? So I did a video about it, right? So that's what I do when I find that people don't know much about a concept. I say, hey, let's do a video. So for people that don't know what toil and how to manage your toil budget and take down that toil and automate and ruthless automation, right, is kind of the vision there. And so yeah, people should check that out, right? I think it's a tremendous piece of the puzzle of site reliability engineers. And so we have the chance to have both of you here today because you're bringing kind of two different backgrounds, right? It's actually pretty interesting to see the two profiles and the kind of difference in skills that you bring to the table. So Ryan, can you tell us a little bit about the TAC founding story? I know that's a very when you describe it to me, I was like, it's like a movie in real life. So it's always fun.
Oh boy, yeah. It's been quite the journey to get to where we are now. Today, TAC funding is probably as consistent as it's been, which is still not saying much. So let's rewind. Starting in like 2008, 2009, it was effectively a lab program. We knew there were some problems to be solved with digitally aided close air support. And so AFRL, with help from a few other organizations, started to get together this vision of using smartphones, which were then an emerging technology, start to get maps on phones and see just what we could do with that. So for the first several years of TAC's existence, it was just like pure 6.1, 6.2 type funding. The right people in SOCOM saw
Tell
the
people
product.
tell people what 6.2, 6.1. Most people don't
Oh,
know.
thanks.
I
Yeah.
know, but you need to give a little insight on what that means.
Yeah, pure research and development. So in the DoD, we put a lot of effort into trying to get programs to kind of a program of record or sustained status. And so there is some analog to like the book Loon Shots, where the one of the recommendations is separate the kind of the really moonshotty R&D stuff from the stuff that tends to move a bit slower. So that's kind of where ATAC started, in that pure, fast-moving, pivot a lot, find your way R&D realm. But now it's very much moved into that sustained realm. So that transition started to occur, that phase change from total like R&D world to more sustained started to happen in probably the 2012, 2013, 2014 timeframe, where some programs of record began to adopt TAC. But really, all along, TAC has been a very well used stream of small dollars. So, we look at programs like outside TAC that, it's like, we'll solve these big problems that need to be solved for the DoD or other agencies in the $1 billion range. 30 million annual spend, $100 million annual spend, 2 billion annual spend for a huge portfolio. And by all means, those dollar figures need to be there, those magnitudes need to be there. But TAC has always been really nimble. So I'd say when it was at AFRL, the annual budget was no more than a couple $1,000,000. So you're talking a few, three to eight maybe full-time employees developing TAC. And so the key there was we would always get people on site with the users. So tended to be with kind of the national mission force community and SOCOM initially, and we would get people out to like jump ranges. So that was one of the first non-fires applications of TAC was, hey, could I use this thing, kind of like what you see here behind me, like could I use that device to be my like kind of like a cockpit display as I'm jumping down from an aircraft under a canopy with a parachute, military free fall? Can I navigate with that? And we found out, yeah, we can do that. And so in many cases, the jumper would land, kit and all, everything on them, camo, helmet, all the gear. And they'd walk over to the developer, parachute still like streaming on the ground behind them. They'd walk over to the developer, say, this sucked. Can you make this better? And that's probably like kind language compared to what we hear out there. So that's where we started, in a very crude, rudimentary form of DevOps. There were no pipelines, there was no CI, there was no unit testing, there was certainly no tac.gov. There were things like it, but not really a government-owned platform back then. And so at a few $1,000,000 a year, now we've grown to a place where the TAC Product Center is well resourced, well endowed by what we call our TAC Configuration Steering Board, and that's a collection of PEO, Program Executive Office, so kind of senior middle management in the DoD offices that all agree every year, hey, we're going to chip in an equal slice of the pie, and we're going to make TAC viable. And so that's what funds our organization. There's also revenue from foreign military sales cases. So go from back then to where it was, a few million here, a few million there, maybe some fallout, plus some plug-in development from like especially the SOF communities, Special Operations Forces communities, to now we have fairly well-resourced program offices like PEO C3T on the Army side and PEO Soldier, to senior material leader, airspace mission planning and Aeronet on the Air Force side, special warfare on the Air Force side, several program offices in SOCOM, and then also federal agencies like Department of State, Department of Justice, and we've had a very warm relationship with DHS as well over the years. So it's all these people that come together and say, look, we care about friendly force identification and target correlation, whether that's a target to be prosecuted with kinetic effects, whether that's an adversary that just needs to be kind of rolled up and captured, or whether that's just me getting from point A to point B. People care about doing that. And what we've been able to strike is this really nice balance of commoditized product, which we ship with this budget, and then also a highly extensible plugins model. So Andrew alluded to automation. Automation and modularity happen throughout the TAC community. And so with a fairly modest budget of about $9.5 million a year, we're able to steward these capabilities for a large and growing ecosystem. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, and we'll do a deep dive also on the mobile stuff. As you can see on the banner at the bottom, people can go and create an account and check on the Google Play Store, the ATAC app, and the iTAC app on the Apple Store. We'll talk a little bit about accreditation at some point and how you go through this challenge of mobile apps. I think mobile apps are probably the hardest things to get accredited in the department, so that's going to be interesting. So
yes,
you talked about obviously the funding story. You talk about funding, but how big is TAC today when it comes to people?
Mm-hmm. It's like a multi-layered answer. We can't measure daily active users the same way that like Facebook or another large connected platform would. Many of our users are very sparingly on the grid, especially if they're using these commercial devices in a classified environment running ATAC. They're never going to pop up online and say, I've been using TAC this much. So the layers are something like this. So we main TAC.gov. Anybody can go there and get an account. The permissions are really well architected to where if you're only a public website user, you only have a Gmail address, you're not on contract to the government, you can get public website access. All the way up to military SDK access, which is the full suite of Title 10 capabilities, military capabilities with a need to know. So on TAC.gov, we have, I think, about 17,000 registered TAC users. And then we also have north of 3,000 registered developers. So right there, we'll call that about 17,000. And that's one bucket that overlaps with several others. We have, I think, north of 170,000 ATAC users now. So those are distinct downloads tied to individual Google accounts through Google Play Store. And we have some controls, some restrictions in place, make sure that we're not willingly giving capability to embargoed countries. But by and large, it's pretty much open to the most of the world. It's about 170,000 users there. iTAC, I believe, is north of 70,000 users just through Apple App Store today. So those overlap to some degree. It's really hard for us to tell which one is distinct. So we'll just call that about 200,000 users outright through commercial channels. Then we also have the government program of record space. So we know there are some fairly large user bases that are only growing in, like, especially like conventional Army infantry, where TAC is really taking off among airborne, but also other echelon or other types of formations. There's the soft formations. There's now a growing caucus in the aircrew community, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps. And then there's the mounted community as well, whether that's on vehicles on the ground or helicopters. And so best we can tell just by talking to program offices and the number of physical kits they've fielded that have ATAC or WinTAC or whatever client app running on them, that's about another 150,000. So based on as I think deep as we can track without truly knowing daily active users, there's about 350,000 users across the commercial public space and the military space. And the trend that we've observed is as we have tracked numbers over the years, it tends to be an exponential growth curve. So you hear Andrew hit on automation. I've talked about automation. The only way the developer community and the user community can grow is through automation, robust plugin APIs, freely available SDKs, freely available product, and that's a big reason why we're at the volume we are today.
When you look at the team internal to the TAC team, what are we talking about in terms of what it takes to support and build all these capabilities?
Yeah, we're at about 20 to 24 people, depending on kind of where we are in the year. Yeah, it's a very lean crew. Everybody's expected to kind of be at the varsity level in their craft, and we get a lot of stuff done. We operate as a pretty tight team. We're on daily stand up every day as a staff, just because there's so much happening. There's no way we could just do with a once a week staff meeting or something like that. So we treat it as a stand up. We go around just like we would on a scrum team. And that was a tactic that I picked up on another team. Even at the program level, it is so helpful to have that kind of a cadence. But yeah, it's a small team. Downstream, we have program offices that have 20, 40, 100 people supporting the configuration management of these kits, plugin development. But at the TAC Product Center, kind of where all the source code lives on tac.gov and proliferates out, we're about 22 dozen people.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Very lean and effective, and I guess multifaceted, kind of full stack, model. So when you look at your release cycle, what are we talking about in terms of velocity of release?
Yeah, we feel that like our biggest commitment to the community beyond like a really good usable product is just a predictable release cadence. So we release currently on a trimesterly basis. Frankly, like internally, like if we're testing, or we're like, running our own operations, like at a, field event or something like that, we do see like truly elite durametric performance, but there's a lot of downstream dependencies at these program offices that we serve where, just getting an ATO for a new major version, 4.x, 5.x, et cetera, that's a 6-month lead time. And then there's configuration management. Some program offices have really long lead times for DT, developmental test, operational test, getting kits out with devices on them. ATAC in particular has really forced the DoD program office space to evolve in ways. Hey, users say they want this, so you can either tell the user, no, you don't get this, which program offices have done, or you can say, here, you get this, in which case most program offices kind of end up back on that path anyway of having to evolve their practices, their configuration management, learning how to get Android devices or whatever fielded. So it's every 120 days for us, just to align with some other larger DoD programs. We're trying to drive that in the next 6 to 12 months to like a quarterly release cadence. But by and large, we make our regular builds available through tac.gov or through at least our Canary channels on a daily basis. Just depends on how quickly programs or people want to accept. Kind of want to make that decision, that business decision of release versus deploy. We make the releases available for test as frequently as people want them, but deploy typically happens on a 4 to 6 month basis or less frequently, which we're also trying to help program offices overcome.
So each program office effectively has their own cycle, or they try
Yeah.
to align to the same versions?
Yeah, they'll have their own cycle. So some program offices will be on the latest minor version. So we use a semantic versioning scheme of major version, minor version, patch release. If you look on Google Play Store, I think we're on 4.7.0.4. And so 4.7 is kind of the current baseline version of tech products that's out right now. But honestly, Nick, we'll find programs in the DoD that, for whatever reason, are handicapped from releasing more frequently. Sometimes it's for really valid reasons. There's some big like DoD level things where like you can't release a fires configuration, if we're doing air to ground fires or surface to surface fires, doing that digitally unless it's really thoroughly validated. And that's a process that we can do a little bit to help solve at Tech Product Center, but it's some pretty big joint requirements level rocks that we've got to solve for. Programs will typically be like 1 to 2 minor versions behind where we are. Again, there's a few bleeding edge organizations that always stay up on latest. But I think, if you were to poll the community, you'd probably find a lot of organizations on 4.4 and a lot of organizations on 4.2. We're really trying to help downstream program offices overcome those barriers to configuration management and accreditation, because we take a really, I think, robust approach to cybersecurity. So we invest like 10 to 15% of our budget annually in the tooling, the processes, the kind of like third-party assessments, red teams, blue teams of our products, to make sure that like the latest version of TAC is always the most secure. It doesn't just have the best features, but it's also the most secure. And so like that's the biggest reason for being up on latest that I think we see is like features may be better, but features are manifesting more and more in the plugin space. New features come with plugins. Our role is to make sure that the products that we ship, the core products on which the plugins ride, are stable and they're secure. And that's the biggest benefit of staying up on latest.
So when you look at the plugin landscape, how many of the plugins are built by the tech team internally versus partners and third parties?
Yeah, we develop and sustain hardly any plugins. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 that we truly have developed for TAC, but our role is the core products themselves. I think we did a query just last week, and we're at about 250 plugins now. That doesn't mean they're all like fully baked, like ready for primetime plugins. People use the plugin space like as it should be used for like R&D purposes. People also use plugins for like very serious real world things like Link 16 and Saddle and VMF, like data link interoperability, some pretty stringent requirements. So plugins run the spectrum of very alpha, pre-beta feel to highly mature, really polished, sustained things. But we
Do you have
just
a
make sure they're
marketplace?
built and keyed.
I guess, do you have
Yeah,
a
so tech.
marketplace for the plugins, or how do people find them?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to tech.gov and look at our products tab, you'll find all releasable plugins for your permission level available there. You do have to log in to download them. We do have several plugins approved for public release and in the Google Play Store as well, at least for ATAC.
Do you have a validation process for plugins, or just anyone can go and post it, or you do some sort of assessment, cyber assessment? How do you vet plugins, I guess?
Yeah, plugins are generally handled as like bespoke to specific programs. So before somebody gets to the point where they want to, so let's say a program comes to Tech Product Center, says, I want to develop a new plugin. We say, great, we've got the tools in place to do that. So we'll help them with, automation being key. We'll help them get a new project created in GitLab. They'll clone like the Hello World project, which is also available on GitHub, and they'll download the ATAC SDK. So they don't get the full soup to nuts source code if they don't need it. Instead, they'll just have access to the plugin API and the documentation around it. The government representative for that plugin, or if it's a private company developing it, the person paying for that plugin at the company, will fill out a memorandum for record for us. We've got an MFR template that says, hey, how and when and to what type of audience do you want your plugin released? That today is still a little bit of paperwork, requires a digital signature, but we're working to automate that on tech.gov. And that tells us, assign these permissions in tech.gov to this plugin. And on GitLab to this plugin. So when that plugin is ready for like a beta release, or like if it needs to go through like a robust like developmental test, operational test cycle, whatever that program manager decides for that plugin based on the process they have at their organization, we just help them follow that with the plugin release process. So the plugins you see on Google Play Store, for example, like Data Sync, Vehicle Navigation System, and a couple others, those all have a little bit of paperwork, a little bit of paper trail behind them, where a program manager on the government side or an industry has said, I want this plugin released to Play Store and if it's a government plugin, government-owned plugin, I want my foreign disclosure officer to sign off as well and say this is approved for public release. So there's actually quite a bit of rigor that goes into not just releasing the core products themselves. Like we see it on Play Store, GitHub. There's a lot of paperwork that went into that, because we're the government and we're good at paperwork. But we also make sure that like the requisite rigor is there for kind of the less glamorous aspects of software development in the government, like foreign release, foreign disclosure, public affairs, legal aspects, and then security as well. So we run 4 to 5 scans, kind of the standard batch of 4 to 5 scans across all the Android space, the Windows space, I think the tax server space, and I think just about all of our products get the full suite of 4 to 5 scans. That's an artifact that we provide downstream to program offices in an effort to help them with their own accreditation process.
Yeah, so you give them the scan results of the scanners, and so they can directly see the results without having to do their own scans. And so I guess plugins usually are all native to the phone technology, or is it designed to be agnostic to the platform, I guess?
Good question. Yeah. So right now, plugins are platform specific. In other words, ATAC plugins will only work in ATAC. WinTAC plugins only run in WinTAC, TAC server, WebTAC, etc. There were some fundamental limitations, I'd say like 7 or 8 years ago when we first started investing at AFRL in a plugin architecture that caused us to go down a path that led to a different architecture for ATAC, a different architecture for WinTAC, different architecture for TAC server. We've tried, tools like Xamarin, for example. A few years ago, we said, hey, could we just have ATAC that also runs on Windows? Well, based on some very fundamental constraints of the map engine, the globe itself, which is really high quality, we had to make a design choice to have kind of a globe and comms, communications kernel backend that is portable between Windows and Android, and then kind of a wrapper for like the plugin APIs, the UI and stuff like that is different for like Android, Windows, iPhone, etc.
And what map technology do you guys use?
It's custom. We started off in the early days using a derivative of NASA Whirlwind, so heavily modified from that baseline. But since our lead developer, Chris Lawrence, he's actually a geospatial and computer graphics expert as well. And so we've been able to take that map engine, what we call TAC kernel, which has the comms layer, the map engine, etc., all wrapped into it, and take that through the NGA, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency validation process. And this is really unique, Nick, because this is the first app to do this in the Android space, at least, be certified by the NGA for target coordinate mensuration. Now, it's a really specific capability for the fires, like air-to-ground fires, surface-to-surface fires realm in the DoD. But the map engine and ATAC, provided the map imagery is also of a certain quality, is good enough and is validated to actually put a GPS guided bomb down on a coordinate derived from the Android map. Yeah.
Wow, the precision required for that obviously is it's quite important, and you can mess up, and that's a very specific expertise. And I guess, are you enabling teams to have different overlay of maps or different abilities to layer stuff?
Yeah. So we try to support every map imagery type imaginable. There are a couple gaps that we know about, but by and large, we serve the broad community. So native imagery that you would get from a national intelligence platform, all the way to just basic WMS, WMTS sources from if you want to pull down like Google or Bing imagery, really super easy ways to put those endpoints in as URLs in the layers tool and start streaming map imagery. That was a really big deal 9 years ago. We used some
Yeah.
open source technology called the MOBAC tool, host tiles in the map engine, and now you can actually just be on your phone and stream that map imagery. Like that didn't exist in the DoD. So it does now, other platforms as well, but that was kind of a first. But yeah, things like 3D models as well. Those are well supported in ATAC and WinTAC, and then like KMZ, KML overlays. So like shape files, most of the standard stuff you would expect to like throw on a map in any other tool, Google Earth or otherwise, you can reasonably expect to see represented well in the TAC products.
That's very cool. So, a couple of questions on your funding. We're gonna get into that, but really, when I take a step back and I look at what questions people ask me when they see innovative teams like you guys, is how do we sustain them? How do we make sure they're gonna exist, 2 or 3 years from now? And a lot of people argue that you have to be a program of record to do that. And I've seen when people do it, including at Platform One, and we made them a program of record. I think often it's a beginning of the end of the agility aspect of things,
Yes.
and so it's a big problem. I would argue that you probably don't want to be a program of record. Tell us a little bit about how you're funded.
Yeah, absolutely. The configuration steering board that I mentioned, I mean, the long and the short of it is they send a MIPR, or Military Interdepartmental Purchase Request, every year, at some point in the year, to our finance people. And we get that routed to our various contract vehicles or our civilian staff positions. But we're unique, maybe not totally unique, but somewhat unique in that TAC, as broadly used as it is actually a layer completely removed from the kind of the congressional PPB&E, or planning, programming, budgeting, and execution cycle. We're not a working capital fund. We're not a working capital organization. We're a product house. But each of those organizations effectively serves as an investor on what you would liken to like a corporate board of investors in private sector. We view ourselves as a company that operates inside the U.S. government truly, because we do have that separation from the kind of the congressional budgeting process. So funds are always tight, but we operate within our means. We're on a very regular kind of budgeting, spend plan tracking process. Things happen, and we've got to be able to respond to those as a staff, and we do. But where we funded, we have a pretty good idea at the start of the fiscal year where we'll be. We kind of start working that several months in advance with our kind of upstream program office customers, and then where we can put labor. Civilian labor, cloud infrastructure costs, tooling costs, developer labor, where we can put costs toward those things, then we do that within our notional funding profile. But it is, it's not tied to the legacy process, which helps and hurts. Like, we do think to ourselves sometimes, like, boy, wouldn't it be great if we didn't have a concern about X being funded? Wouldn't it be great if we were funded at this level? And so to some degree, I think TAC the Tech Product Center does need to be resourced to a greater degree. Like I said, we're funded at $9.5 million to not just like do like coding development, which would be a very healthy budget for just coding, but it's the full spectrum of delivery. It's the kind of the overhead staff that comes with that.
Operations.
Exactly. Like, I think DoD in general is just kind of coming to grips with how powerful cloud can be, but also like you got to be able to pay the bill. And like we don't see our cloud bill slowing down at Tech Product Center anytime soon. We've seen a very steady, predictable, linear increase as our user base has like steadily grown on tech.gov. I said earlier, like our user base is exponential, but like our user count on tech.gov is very linear in nature. So it makes for cloud costs to be very, predictable in nature. But, if our funding is level, that calls into question, like, well, then what happens? Like, what gets prioritized if your top line is level and your operating costs are going like this? You got to make some hard decisions. So that's why we say, like, we know what like tech product centers should be priced out at on an annual basis. We think there's a lot of value in being kind of a degree removed from the pond because that gives us a lot of agility. Notionally, if we were a formal program of record or a jointly operated program, we would probably end up with ACAT 1 oversight just due to the breadth of the program. It's not even a program, right? We just said that, but the breadth of the kind of the user base, the utilization of the products. I think we find a lot of value in the configuration steering board model that we employ, because we're always pushing to deliver that next best increment of value. But we do have to find some creative ways to kind of resource this huge and growing customer base as well. That's an unsolved problem.
Are you impacted in any way during the continuing resolution?
Not really. We, since we operate on that kind of that out of hide fund contribution basis.
Yeah, they may throw the money ahead enough to
Yeah.
not
Okay.
impact you.
Yeah. I mean, there are impacts there. Like, so different CSB members will send their funding at different points in the year, and
Yeah.
so
You're gonna
if they're
struggle
counting
with
on,
money, maybe.
yeah, so like we have some that like count on sending their funds toward the end of the fiscal year,
Right.
once the rest of their accounts are settled, and
It
then you
depends
kind of get
on
it
how
in
long it
before.
lasts too, I assume. If
Yeah,
it lasts
exactly.
forever,
Yeah.
that's a problem. So
Yeah.
Congress has to
So
wake up and do their jobs, but that's a different problem. Yeah.
different problem, exactly. But yeah, I think on average we process about one of those purchase requests every month,
Mhm.
and it works. But if you look at the different channels where we put funding, whether on a couple different contracts, because it is
Mhm.
important that we break out our developers from our kind of behind the green curtain, systems engineering technical advisors staff, our CETA staff. Those are the people that we have to empower, like Andrew, for example. We need to empower those people to operate largely in the same way we do on the government side, whereas it's not important for like our developers to have that same level of kind of oversight and access. But anyway, that drives multiple contracting vehicles, and we have to kind of split things up. We have
Yep.
to, make very deliberate choices about where we put that very like hyper incremental funding. We plan for it. We feel like we have a good plan in place all the time. We're ready to execute to that and make changes, but it does make for what can be a pretty precarious situation. It's not truly one funding increment every month. It's more like a few funding increments this month, and then a few months later, a few more. It's chunked, and
Yeah.
we do
Which
have
is
to
good and
stretch
bad.
things sometimes. Yeah, it's good and bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us, I guess, a little bit about, and I know it's kind of both you and Andrew here, about your tech stack and your cloud environment, right? Because there's a government provided capability there. You also leverage a lot of open source and commercial technologies. You talked about GitLab for your source code repo stuff and probably CI stuff. And tell us a little bit about what you got there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you had mentioned, we do heavily leverage open source software. So, for example, for our chat, we use Mattermost, um, GitLab runners.
Are you
Yeah,
on the GitLab side? Are you hosted on GitLab.com or you have your own instance?
no, we self-host. We
Yeah.
basically all of the services that we run are self-hosted.
Yeah.
Um,
What cloud?
sorry?
What cloud do you use?
Oh, it's GovCloud. It's
What
GovCloud.
cloud? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
AWS. Yeah.
Yep. And
All five. Or what impact level? I guess do you end up hosting the stuff at?
Yeah. We hosted
believe, yeah.
IL4 on the
Oh,
FedRAMP ATO. Yeah.
yeah. Got it.
hmm Yeah, but I mean, it's a fairly standard, I would guess you could describe it as like a cloud infrastructure configuration, reverse proxies, NAT for egress,
Mm-hmm.
your public-private subnets, etc. got several Kubernetes clusters at this point. Really, I would say kind of the highest, well, maybe not the highest, but it definitely plays a core part in all of this is the builds cluster that we've established.
That's the biggest challenge, right, for mobile work. That's on GovCloud. I mean, there's a lot of services on the traditional Amazon services, but obviously GovCloud does not always have the same priority. So what do you end up using, I guess, for Android and iOS?
Yeah, so really, so for iOS, it's not at the same scalability as, for example, ATAC, and really anything that is using that builds cluster, if you will, because really with iOS development, it really is ITAC, and then some compilations for TAC kernel in particular. But with the builds cluster in particular, that has not only the GitLab runners, the controller pods in there, but it also is leveraging cluster autoscaler. So we might be able to do well. Everyone's doing their own plugin development, right? So you have kind of this asynchronous CI pipeline situation kind of happening, and then whenever there needs to be a complete build of ATAC core and then all the plugins, we have another pipeline that gets kicked off, and that pipeline, as of fairly recently, I would say within the past 2 to 3 weeks now, has enabled this massive concurrency situation. Whereas before with Jenkins, that we were using to do these builds, we would see on average about 12 hours from start to finish for core, and then all of the plugins, and then those variants, etc. And with the migration over to the GitLab runner CI pipeline, and really some of the vertical scaling that we've done in lieu of moving over to the Kubernetes cluster into horizontal auto scaling, and then also with the cluster auto scaler that we have in the builds cluster, we've been able to take that build time from about, like I said, on about 12 hours or so to under an hour. And it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to see it. It's actually really exciting, because it takes the cluster from about 6 worker nodes or so to a little over 100 in the span of a couple of minutes, and then it also ends up kicking off a little over 100 jobs concurrently. And so you can think of, okay, so that's all well and good. How do you handle like the second and third order effects of something like that, right? So you can kick off 100 jobs, but if your supporting services aren't able to handle that kind of bursty traffic, so for example, you've got 100 jobs, now you need to pull 100 images, depending on your image pull policy and things of that nature, right? But yeah, so it's like, how do you kind of handle that without totally tanking your service, right? So there was a little bit of kernel network configuration that needed to happen there that we did. We also, like I said, we vertically scaled not only the reverse proxies, but also the services themselves. And in our load testing that we did, we were seeing a complete saturation of that 10 gigabit Ethernet connection for several minutes while I would say like the bulk of the download, which is really the image pulls, was happening. So in that period of a couple minutes, you're pulling about 200 gigabytes worth of data to this cluster that just auto scaled up past 100 worker nodes, and this is all happening within a couple minutes to support that kind of delivery time. So it's been really exciting to kind of see that progression, and really, all of this is kind of born out of necessity, is the point that I want to make. Like, it is fun to develop this and work on it and see it improve and iterate on it and continue to see it grow. But a lot of it has to do with just the sheer amount of growth and scale that we need to be at in order to continue to support TAC Product Center and its products. So.
And it's pretty amazing numbers, right? Because in DoD you don't hear that kind of number. I remember talking to a team that was so excited, spending 100 million a year building a web app used by 3,000 people, and during the Afghanistan exit, they had to scale to 6,500, which is not that much, usually for a web app. In fact, it's probably a rounding error for commercial companies, right?
Right.
And they were proud of themselves to be able to do that after taking the app down for 5 days. And I'm like, guys, you live in a parallel universe. This is not how you can be happy. Like, this is not, you're putting 100 mil of taxpayer money, and you don't have the logistic and architecture, right? Like you were talking about the autoscaler with Kubernetes. That's really, I don't know. I don't think it's just a Jenkins versus GitLab difference. I think the real, probably big differentiator there was the autoscaling capability. I'm sure there's some progress in the runners, but Jenkins definitely can scale pretty big too. But
Right.
I'm a big fan of GitLab. But the fact is, I think the autoscaling capability was the real differentiator there. And that tells you, like, the foundation of people dismissed it. In fact, that team refused at the time to move to Kubernetes. They were using Cloud Foundry, and they had no capability to do that kind of stuff. And the worst is they use that as a case study to show that they were successful. Effectively saying, well, 5 days during the Afghanistan exit, where we lose access to the app effectively for 5 days, is a success. It's not a success. It's just what it is. But people, it's just interesting, right? What I find is people don't know what they don't know. So unfortunately, when they've been living in this DoD bubble for so many years and seeing what other have been doing, often with wasting billions of taxpayer money and no ability to scale, and certainly not in a 5-day time frame. For them, it's a success story, which is okay. But the fact is, there's also a higher bar of SLAs. Back I did a video on service level objectives and indicators and service level agreements. Most government teams providing services don't have SLAs. They don't even know what it is. So it's interesting, right, how you architected the stack. So you talked about the cloud. You talked about the foundational aspect of the CI. And so effectively you're giving access to all these development teams to also build their plugins there. So it's not just your teams, it's thousands of developers using the pipelines to build plugins.
Correct.
What are the other pieces when it comes to mobile, right? What's unique to be able to build these mobile plugins that you had to figure out on the GovCloud standpoint? Was there some services? Like, is there, iOS specific build capabilities? Or are you using the commercial products, open source products? Are you using Amazon services? Do you know?
I mean, it's we use Gradle throughout
Yeah.
because all these plugins and the core application are written in Java. And really from there you just you would get your Android build tools and that can run
Right.
on x86 and I believe ARM. So I mean it's
Right.
fairly straightforward as far as the compilation goes for
What about the iOS side of the house? I
the
guess is that the
Android
same
side.
on iOS?
Right. So with iOS it's as I'd mentioned, it doesn't leverage that builds cluster simply because there
Right.
hasn't been a ton of Mac slash Apple specific development outside of ITAC. And so what ends up happening there is we do have GitLab runners installed on those Mac hosts, and then those developer builds happen on those hosts. So yeah, it's I mean when you look at the EULA for Apple, I mean they explicitly require that you run it on their hardware. You can't
Right.
you can't do it outside of it. So that's what it is.
What is it? So how do you end up doing that? I guess what's the process to get that done?
From just like if I were to take you through like a standard ITAC build, or
Yeah, just how do you end up getting these iOS plugins done? Does that leave the cloud and he goes to a physical device to be able to build those, or
well,
is
yeah,
it happening
that's correct. It's a Mac. It's an actual physical
in
Apple. It's
right?
a Mac Mini.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I just wanted to let you say for
Right.
people to know how this works, because most people
Right.
have no clue how to get this done in the government side. So how do you end up managing these devices? Are they devices you end up running yourself in on premise? And
Yes,
or is
yes,
it
it is.
provided by the PEOs, or is it just you provide uh,
Yeah.
to the people? I guess, how do you end up, when there's all these developers building stuff, how do you end up, bringing it to your device to do that work, I guess?
I mean, from like a compilation standpoint, it really is a matter of just registering the runner in GitLab,
Right.
and then from there, if a Mac specific build needs to happen, then you can go and you can use I think it's either tagging or labels. I can't remember the
Oh, I
vocabulary
see.
that
So that's
GitLab
how you
uses,
know.
but that's
I
how you
see.
would go and
Okay.
you slate a particular job for the
I see.
that
Interesting.
hardware. Mhm.
Okay, you you
So
you connected effectively the hardware to the cloud, right? To be able
basically,
to
right.
automate that. So it's
Mhm.
not a manual, it's not human doing that pull from the cloud and bring it. It's all completely end-to-end automated. Yeah, that's pretty unique. I don't know of
That's
any
the ticket.
team. Yeah, I don't know if you could almost, I don't know if you're promoting this, to get more money, but so many teams are struggling with mobile. You could probably, sell this kind of build as a service, even for people now
Hmm.
potentially using the tech
Interesting.
SDK. As because I can tell you, there's just no one in the department that's able to really streamline the build process of mobile apps. Web apps, sure, but not native apps. And
Mhm,
so that
mhm.
that is a pretty unique. It could almost be spun out or become a
Hmm.
separate service
It's
with the
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
taxpayers. We're wasting a lot of money reinventing the wheel.
right.
There's a team at the Air Force, PO BES, which is the business side of the Air Force, and they have dozens of mobile apps, and they've been trying to, Bespin is the software factory, Bespin, and they would probably love to engage with you on trying to understand how you do this. They have their own stuff, and the issue, of course, is people love to build stuff in vacuums and reinvent the wheel, um, often for reasons they were taught, not to depend on others, and sometimes it's fine and sometimes it's not fine. But at the
Hmm.
very least, I think having an engagement with PO Bez and
Yeah.
Best and you guys definitely could lead to some additional funding, for
That's
your
a great
growth.
idea. I know a couple of the guys there. I'll reach out.
Yeah, yeah, because
Get caught up
I
with
mean,
them.
it's just a unique offering, and I've yet to see someone streamline it the way you've done it. So, and at that, what's frustrating me a little bit, I'm not gonna lie, is kind of the very little amount of money you're spending to do this. When I've seen other teams do something similar and not even as automated, and yet take 20 times the money. So,
Hmm.
uh, definitely, I'm all about saving the taxpayer money, right? So,
Mhm.
Sure.
right.
Sure.
So
Sure.
we talk about the stack, right?
Hmm.
I guess when you look at the challenges, leveraging
Hmm.
Android, obviously there's the tech stack is not that bad, but when it comes to accreditation, there's obviously the stalls, and you talked about like all the disclosure and the release process in terms of legal aspect of
Hmm.
releasing
Hmm.
that to the store. But you also have a kind of a private store for non-public plugins and stuff, like CUI stuff. Do you do that?
Yeah, it kind of diverges. So like, we host Play Store. Play Store was always meant to be no more than kind of a beta user case, or kind of a canary channel. And
Hmm.
it's proven to be a lot more useful than that, but it does also give us a lot of really good, accurate telemetry. If we have a crash, like, we always want crash logs. So if you have a crash in ATAC, like, send your logs to support@tac.gov. But like, program offices will employ a variety of mobile device management solutions. They'll employ enterprise Play stores, so Play stores that they can pay for and kind of use to distribute their own product. And then some people will just like downright sideload onto devices, either through just straight up USB, or kind of update. So Tax Server actually has an app update capability built into it. It is not a mobile device manager, but it is a good substitute in the event you don't have access to one. There are basically a lot of channels people can use for endpoint management. It's really kind of left to the program office to decide. One of the neat things that's been developed, though, is in the absence of a mobile device manager that's meant to load headless plugins that manifest in the ATAC application, which is a pretty unique design pattern. Our friends in the Army have developed a government-owned and unlimited rights to the source code mobile device manager called Watchtower. And Watchtower is a pretty deep capability. There's a lot under the hood, but it's the first mobile device manager that was designed specifically for the tech products. And so we find some other mobile content managers that have arisen as well. But that's really the first mobile device manager for TAC specifically. And that's how, if you're familiar with the DARPA SHARE program, that was a really transformational program that the DARPA Strategic Technology Office led. They've enabled some pretty fine-grained information sharing capabilities among conventional forces over mesh network radios, but it's pretty heavily premised on this Watchtower capability, which keeps the apps up to date, keeps them synced with whatever version, whatever plugin configuration they want the soldiers to run with. It's a great capability. It's not publicly released at this time, but certainly knowledge of it is. And so we simply aim to make really good, rock solid products available to downstream customers, and however they choose to distribute those products to their constituents, to their users, they're free to do.
Yeah, sorry, my Chrome crashed. I don't know what happened. That's the first time I
Oh no.
Chrome. I guess
You got to try Firefox.
No, China does not want us to innovate. So they're trying to slow us down by crashing my Chrome. That's the first time that happened. So anyway, all right. So let's talk about a little bit. Also the accreditation challenges, right? Love for you to give us a little bit of a rundown on. You talked about obviously you have to deal with all these program offices. So effectively, you're not accrediting as a service for everybody. They all have to do their own accreditation, but you also have to do your own stuff for your own hosting. So how do you with all that, I guess?
Yeah, so for our hosting, we take a fairly simple approach. We don't process operational data. We're not connected to operational networks. We exist merely as a development and distribution capability. And so we exist currently under kind of living on top of the FedRAMP ATO for AWS GovCloud. Now, we acknowledge and we fully realize we should live under an ATO. One of the ironies here is that ATAC, the TAC products in general, really are so broadly used. We struggle to identify an authorizing official for TAC.gov. If it's a program developing and shipping capability, it's easy for that program to identify their own authorizing official. They pretty much always have one. But it's kind of service specific how those folks are arranged and assigned to programs and configurations. But with TAC, it's so highly commoditized and diffused. We actually don't have an assigned authorizing official for TAC.gov. We would like to have one because we have what we think is a really compelling case for a continuous ATO that encompasses the development environment and the client products as well. Now, the client products and the configurations that are shipped through program offices, those absolutely do have bespoke ATOs, because as you load up an Android device or a Windows laptop or a server with different plugins. TAC server can have plugins, WebTech can have plugins, WebTech can have plugins. You're going to have different configurations. These architectures are going to drip significantly, both in version and capability, depending on what plugins are employed. So downstream authorizing officials will have their own kind of purview. So it's really kind of it's separate. We make the products available. Program officers accredit what they want. There was a time where there was some fairly emphatic views across the services in general, in the federal agencies, where they said, authorizing officials would say, I will never accredit that Android device for use in the field. The user said they needed it to do their mission, and thankfully, the user prevailed, and the kind of the AO community came around. And certainly, there's been a lot of evolution to that front, where now there's fairly robust practices in place for identifying, mapping all the NIST 800.53 controls into EMAS, and an authorizing official saying, yes, I approve this configuration. SOCOM has even done something cool with an all things TAC ATO. Programs have adopted fairly novel but also reasonable approaches, where they say the authorizing official and their SCA and SCAR and ISOs and ISM will say, hey, I'm going to accredit ATAC, WinTAC, and TAC server for version 4.x, and literally the ATO will say 4.x. So we're now on 4.7, 4.8 will hit the streets in the mid to late November timeframe, and in theory, that 4.8 will be covered under the same ATO as 4.7 because fundamentally the architecture is not changing, and fundamentally the culture that builds those products and makes them available is consistent, and the tooling we have in place to make those products available is also consistent, and meets a certain degree of inherent security. But I think that is one gap that we have in the TAC community is because TAC doesn't belong to a program where that authorizing official would typically be mapped. We really just kind of live within the FedRAMP ATO guidelines for AWS GovCloud for the development side.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess, is my mic okay? Can you hear me well? Yeah.
Yep.
Good now, yeah.
Okay.
Because there's, I don't know, there's so many issues with StreamYard recently. I don't know what's going on. We lost you on video for a second. My stuff crashed. Anyway. All right. So what's interesting with what you describe is effectively that's a perfect use case for a continuous ATO. I guess, what side of DoD is your authorizing official from?
Well, we don't have one. I think we're fairly closely linked with a number of authorizing officials. We have warm relationships with
You
the
don't have
program
one for your own
offices
cloud, for your own cloud services and stuff? You don't need to go through someone for that?
So the cloud services we purchased through one of our third-party vendors, through one of our contractors, but we purchased the AWS GovCloud offering that's in compliance with, or that's covered under the FedRAMP process. So do we have a dedicated authorizing official for TAC.gov? No. Do we build all of our services within the confines of what's allowed under FedRAMP? Was it Andrew FedRAMP Moderate, I think? Yes. Yeah. And then we
kind of
also
kidding the system a little bit there. And it's probably why you have a .gov and not a .mil. But
we have a .gov and not a .mil because we have non-DoD federal agencies paying into it as well. The .gov namespace, the actual TLD and TAC.gov as a whole was authorized by Mr. DC, by formal memorandum. We kind of break the mold here, Nick, and it's strange because we don't field to just DoD programs. We field to Department of State, Department of Justice, Department of the Treasury, a lot of agencies, DHS. And so that's the true reason why we don't have a .mil. We have a .gov because we serve the whole of U.S. government.
Interesting. Yeah,
so that's authorizing official game a little bit nebulous.
Yeah. It is painful. I mean, you could have done it with a .mil, even if the .gov has to use it. But I think it's also the having a continuous ATO with an enterprise AO like Roger Greenwell in the Air Force DISA. That
Yeah.
could be the answer, because then you, although Roger has never done a single the Contus ATO ever, but if you were to join us with the modern times, then they could do a Contus ATO, and then we would be able to spread it across all the AAOs instead of each of the PEOs having to do their process, which sounds to be like a total nightmare every time there's a new group adopting the application, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think the ideal case that I envision is a senior authorizing official, in a central organization like DISA, granting an ongoing authorization to tac.gov intent, the full domain, and then granting reciprocity to all of our TAC configuration steering board members who then have to accredit their own products, because then that solves a major barrier. A combination of ongoing authorization at a central organization, DISA, CISA, whatever, some organization in the U.S. government that can then reach across organizational lines, extend that reciprocity out to kind of spoke organizations. That's the ideal situation. The products themselves already have kind of a client app, server app. Interesting comments on reciprocity. Maybe not, but we think there's a good model in place for the client apps. They have authorized, SOCOM has authorized reciprocity out from SOCOM's EMAS package for the client apps. Couldn't tell you how broadly that's used. Every office tends to generate their own accreditation package for their specific service and constituency. But we do see the need for a better model for tac.gov and kind of the development platform. I think what that comes down to is that's a project for us. And open sourcing tax server, for example, was that was a project, that was a heavy lift. And we must take these things on. Funny, Gerald. We must take these things on kind of in addition to automating things, serving the community, and where there are willing partners that want to contribute labor to helping us solve these problems. I think that's where we find a good match between our aims and what needs to be done. I will tell you flat out, we don't have the capacity to go run down soup to nuts continuous ATO or ongoing authorization. But we're an agency, to see the value in TAC, the proliferation of it, want to help us pursue that. I think we'd be all ears. We've got a lot of documentation already in place that supports the argumentation. We have a whole Confluence set of pages already cut out actually for continuous ATO research, in fact. So we know we can get there. It's just a matter of finding the labor that it takes to kind of get up over that hill, and someone who wants to kind of be in it for the long haul, keep that ongoing authorization valid.
Yeah, I would have told you to go see Danny Holtzman, but unfortunately the HQE was not renewed, so we're going to lose the only AAOs that's ever signed the country's ATOs in DoD. So
okay,
that's the end of it. Both the Cloud One, Platform One, Kesa Run, F-35, F-22s, GBSD, all these programs depend on Danny for their country's ATOs, but that's all gone. That's too bad. So how do you feel like the DoD is doing with the Defense Innovation Board and all these software harmonization factories? A lot of discussions, a lot of publications. Did you feel like in your time in the department, have you seen progress? And more importantly, in the last year, do you feel like there's maybe a loss of momentum, or is it still pushing pretty strong? I know the bottom up is doing pretty well, but what about the top down?
Yeah, boy, I love the question. I have a lot of opinions, and I'm gonna try to channel them. The guidance itself is it's beautiful. It's music to my ears. I'm a software engineer through and through, and have kind of been up against or wanting to push past a lot of these barriers to delivery. I think my whole career, honestly, it's not a long career at this point, but the memos that we're seeing come out, like from Ms. Hicks, for example, the Defense Innovation Board guidance from several years ago. I've read that stuff cover to cover, and try to treat it as ground truth. Kind of in the circles that I run in, we try to reference these things a lot. As we're building out TAC.gov, as we're improving the delivery channels, the distribution channels of our products, investing in automation, investing in cybersecurity, leveraging open source. Like, the memos really resonate. I'd like to think I have a pretty decent view across like the DoD software ecosystem, whether it's in this capacity, in my SOCOM civilian capacity, in my reserve capacity, having been in industry, the defense industry for a bit. There's a lot of momentum, but man, does it look different across the different services and customer bases. I think the key difference that's really still separating us from being a leading technology organization is how we organize. We treat IT services organizations still as something that must be hierarchical and inherently subordinate to kind of the cultures that rise to lead, like the services, for example. Ship drivers on the Navy side, fighter pilots on the Air Force side, infantry or Army on the Army sides. And then like the acquisitions arms of these services are beholden to those visions, which is a good thing. Like you would not want like an acquisition person leading the Air Force. That would not make sense. But what we don't see yet is kind of a break from the top-down IT services organization, and we still see IT services organized as stovepipes. We see different organizations responsible under the same kind of commander level of the echelon, organizes, okay, like you're going to buy the cloud, you're going to operate the cloud, and you're going to buy and operate the software and data. You're going to do the coding, as people like to say. And it's like, wait a second, like Google doesn't have a J6, you know what I mean? Like we don't really like organize for flow. And I think with a lot of the culture that we're steeped in, it's going to be a while before the DoD is organized as flow. So like, it comes down to organizations, I think like Tech Product Center and others like us, to organize ourselves for flow. And that's, I think, what we've tried to do since becoming an organization is like, okay, great. We're decoupled from like formal, like, JROC or whatever level requirements, big DoD requirements. We're decoupled from the congressional funding cycles and legacy PPB&E models. So now how can we like listen to users or their representatives and deliver capability as predictably and innovatively as we can? I think we're like at the program level, at the program office level across DoD, where we've like, I think, kind of dropped the ball is we still treat these budgets for like software or infrastructure or cloud or whatever, like as things to be managed, not things to be like encouraged, built up, get obstacles out of the way. We see pockets of that, but in general, I think what my own personal observation has been is that where money is dedicated for like a system, whether that system is like edge based, goes on an aircraft, whether that it's cloud native, we treat it as a system that has to be managed as a program. I think one of the realizations we've had recently in SOCOM, now given my SOCOM hat is different from my Tech Product Center hat, but one of the things we realized in SOCOM, where some of the technology is not premised on tech at all, is that like, hey, just because our programs are organized as these big vertically bifurcated silos of funding and ops-driven requirements, doesn't mean the technology has to be leveraged, kind of architected or driven that way. And that's a really easy thing for programs to overcome is, it's a pretty easy sign off from the PM, like, hey, as long as I'm delivering features that make it to an end user somewhere that are, kind of in line with my capability needs statement or something else derived from like DoD 5000, DoDI 5000.87, the software acquisition pathway. As long as I'm delivering features, a lot of other stuff can be commoditized and shared among other programs. We in SOCOM are just kind of starting to like round the corner there and figure that out, which I think is really cool. I'd be curious to know like if other DoD programs have kind of cracked the nut there as well. Like, okay, just because our big budgets come in as silos doesn't mean the technology has to be organized as silos. It means that like we engineers have to actually talk and figure out like modern services to implement, like an API gateway and an event-driven, streaming platform, things like these. I know like Feed One, Data One have a lot of merit to them, and like we're starting to, some of that's starting to rub off on us in SOCOM, but then we end up with like service bifurcations. It's like, well, hey, it has to be soft peculiar, it has to be special operations peculiar in SOCOM. And so it's a combination of building something that is truly special operations peculiar that does need to be built for a special operations user, and just like technologists talking and being empowered to solve problems together. We've seen some really cool things come out of the recent guidance, but it's really going to take like some very high level people saying IT services organizations and the services and agencies and factions of those services, like even if it's in the acquisitions world or the operations world, because we're still bifurcated that way, there's either acquisitions or operations, organize for flow. And you know what? Guess what? I'm going to measure you and your performance report, program manager, on the DORA metrics. What happens if we don't measure PMs on cost schedule performance, and cost schedule performance are just treated as table stakes? What happens if we just assume that the PM isn't going to overspend, that schedule is never going to be blown because it's capacity only, and performance is always going to be on track because like we're just operating to a backlog that's built around users? I think if we start measuring like PMs, like at the service executive, like service acquisition executive level, we start measuring PMs that have IT components to them, whether that's software or data or cloud or whatever, just on the DORA metrics, boy, I think the changes would be transformational in the DoD, because then you have PMs seeking to solve problems on the day-to-day and the strategic level within their programs of how do I knock down these barriers to delivery? How do I actually get up to a point where every week I can be shipping a new version of my software where it's not, it's not about new features. It's about how quickly can I fix the software, because these systems that we field are enormously complex. And like, if I'm an F-16 pilot, do I want to be sitting on a discrepancy report, a DR from developmental test or operational test for 2 years? Or would I like to see that one small thing fixed in a week? That there's some complex problems behind that, but I know there are organizations in the Air Force, in the acquisition world, in the sustainment world, that like are getting at some of that stuff. And I think I choose to view that stuff in an exciting light because I am like inherently an optimist. I think the guidance, the memos, the policies that have come out have been beneficial, but I think we're still struggling to make that connection between like top-down rigid IT services organization and what's really beneficial, which is the pursuit of flow of value. I don't see that happening today.
Yeah, I tried to mandate the DORA metrics with OSDANS, but they said no. So in the meantime, if people don't know what DORA metrics are, of course I have a video on it, because that's what we do here, videos all day. So check that one out. It's very foundational, and like you said, tracking the right metrics and tracking the delivery and the flow, and that's how we build software, right? And there's just no way to succeed without it. We're almost out of time, but I had so many questions, and we have some questions from the public, so I kind of tried to cover this question that's also a time back, and I'm going to bring it up on the screen. We have someone asking kind of a related question, right? Because you have engagements with agencies outside of DoD, with DHS and even FYEY. But people were even wondering, hey, can we integrate TAC into the modern fire and police, and that could be used for the hurricane response and all that kind of stuff. So tell us a little bit about how something like this would happen.
Yeah, pretty much anytime there's a large scale natural disaster these days, you'll find TAC playing some role. Sometimes that role's really small. And we're content with that. We never seek to come in and like dominate an event or like foist our product on users. Our philosophy has always been like we're confident enough in the product that we develop that if it's useful to people, like they're going to use it. Now, to the specific question about modern fire and police, there are some really cutting edge practices going on out west, especially some east, Midwest, South, North as well. The wildland fire community has really started taking a liking to TAC. So first of all, hit us up at support@tac.gov if you want to learn more about that. We'll connect you with some people who are actively integrating TAC into wildland fire, kind of like more normal fire and rescue operations, and also police. I think the open source community in TAC is kind of on the verge of taking off. So like ATAC is open source, the SDK is open source, TAC server and the TAC server SDK are open source. And those are opening up some really cool possibilities for people to use like Open API to rapidly integrate new APIs or new event streams into TAC server than for connectivity out to the TAC endpoints. So I'd say to some extent, like it's already there, but just in pockets. I think best we know, like there is no like one, kind of computer-aided dispatch system to rule them all. Maybe there is, but the neat thing about TAC server is that like, hey, plant a TAC server, develop the plugin that integrates your computer-aided dispatch if it has an open API or a REST API into TAC server. And even if you're just going to push out, a 911 first responder call on the map, there's actually a 911 emergency alert thing that you can do in TAC. It's pretty cool. It's the alert tool. And if you put down a 911 on the app, it actually alerts everybody on your network, and it persists until you throw 2 switches to turn it off. So we use the same thing in DoD for, the exact same tool for if there's, killed in action, God forbid, on the X in the engagement zone, or whether, somebody has a CASEVAC that's needed. There's a lot of potential for TAC, I think, in the first responder ecosystem. I think there are some ways that we need to make it simpler and more intuitive, out of like literally no disrespect for like people using it, but just because there's a lot of stuff in TAC that doesn't need to be exposed. So you see the TAC Syndicate; those are some of our good friends in the public safety wildfire response community. They're doing amazing things, and I just encourage you to kind of reach out to them if public safety, wildland fire, any of that is kind of your jam. There's some really good stuff going on. Yeah, like I said, on YouTube, good endpoints to kind of get hooked up with.
And that demonstrate, something for sure is that small group of people can really truly impact the behemoth that is the DoD at scale and even outside of DoD. And I think you've done that, and of course Andrew with the team have demonstrated that this is achievable. A lot of people argue it's not doable and they find excuses not to do it. You guys do it every day, and that's pretty exciting. Last question for you, right?
Yeah.
And then I always give you two like the last words before we let everybody go. But if you had a magic wand, right? What kind of help / resources do you wish you had more?
Yeah. Well, a couple of them we've kind of maybe like glanced at. One is we're a very effective organization as is, and we live within the budget that we have. But I think the community is kind of at a magnitude now where DoD senior leadership should probably start looking at TAC as a strategic resource, and probably funding it as such. We have 8 to 10 developers that are developing these products with a little bit of help from across the ecosystem. So if you look at our organizational chart, you won't find a set of like, really nice balanced product teams. You'll find a few developers and a few developers and a couple developers and a few developers. And like, it's good. Like we're lean. We're going to do what we need to ship product. But I think we have a more ambitious vision for like TAC could be so many things. It's, not just client applications, but a truly cloud native situational awareness platform from the squad level all the way up to the highest levels of the echelon, the Corps, the Air Force, the fleet level. We've seen some endeavors to kind of go down that road, but they're resourced by programs. They're not resourced like through a central organization like the TAC Product Center that's responsible for maintaining an operational situational awareness and command and control capability. So like that's like one very straightforward, simple ask that we would put out is if you're listening and you're at those kind of senior decision maker levels of the DoD or some of these federal agencies, know that like your people or the people that you exist to support are using TAC in all likelihood, and there's a tremendous return on investment. To put a button on it, like we're resourced at $9.5 million this year. That is not guaranteed for FY24, FY25, et cetera. Something probably outside the palm, just to kind of avoid the rigorous oversight and the overhead that comes with that, but something that really levels us up, probably to 3 to 4 times where we're at right now. I think we look at 30 to 40 million is probably the range we need TAC Product Center and the family of TAC products to be funded at to really adequately sustain it for some of the more complex operational scenarios that we're looking at in DoD and elsewhere. And again, we also reference the idea of an authorizing official. We'd love to kind of like home grow our own, empower our own people. We actually have a cybersecurity lead on our staff, government civilian. So I have a bit of a cybersecurity background myself. My master's work was in that area, but I'm not in that day to day. What I'd like to do is find the way or a way to build that person up, to build him up, and let him be an authorizing official for the TAC community. Allow him to assume that risk of the development environment, and make the always on latest mindset a lot easier on downstream program offices. But if that needs to be someone outside the product center, we just need to know who that is. Whether that's someone accrediting TAC.gov and all of our processes, which we know are secure, we know they're robust, but enabling reciprocity outside TAC Product Center would be a boon. So yeah, the second thing would be an empowered authorizing official who's willing to go to bat for an ongoing authorization for us. And maybe the third thing is it's always hard to get a mandate out. But I think we see enough TAC usage right now across the DoD is that it could be worth looking at, a memorandum that says, man, if you're trying to develop a new situational awareness product, you're probably barking up the wrong tree. And we see that in some pockets. We don't see that everywhere, but we do see that sometimes. The new map engine or new dots on a map kind of tool. There have been a lot of shifts to using TAC as the baseline for that, and certainly we applaud that. But what we'd like to see is like say, hey, the TAC products are free. The development is not, obviously, but the TAC products are free. They're backed by notionally, we're not there yet, but an ongoing authorization such that if you are going to deploy latest in any configuration of plugins, like you can do that. You're allowed. We encourage it, and then we start looking at the paradigm where we've started to go kind of with our foreign military partners, where now we're starting to see like people show up the same exercises with the same tools, TAC, Android, Windows, TAC server, whatever, the same plugins for like tactical data links or our mesh network radios or other capabilities. And they now actually have like a common frame of reference. Another thing to mention about ATAC is it's not just modular open systems architecture in terms of technology. the language is actually MOSA. If you set the language on your Android device to one of 10 different languages, I forget exactly what they are, I can tell you if you're interested. ATAC will actually change its own language in the 4,000 strings that are in the Android RDAT string file to match the language that's on your phone within a set of 10 pretty broadly used languages. So it's partner interoperability on a level that we've just never seen before. There's a lot of facets to our model that make that possible, but I think we truly are on the verge of something big with TAC and unified situational awareness, at least for the O6 level of the echelon and below, maybe elsewhere. But we kind of need to see that substantially increased funding profile so that we're predictable. We can incentivize our vendors to hire. Right now, if we're all hand to mouth with our funding every year, like that funding profile that I talked about, on average once a month, but it's really not that. It's a few every few months. Like, I can't incentivize vendors to hire long-term talent and develop that talent. That is so critical to a long-term operation. We've been able to do that inside the product center, but we need to start seeing that kind of a DoD and federal agencies level, a substantial resourcing, predictable resourcing in the out years so that we can actually incentivize growth in TAC and the development of people, the retention of people. Yeah. More funding, ongoing authorization, and it just, broad encouragement to use the TAC products, not for our sake. Like, we're not evaluated on numbers, or, we don't use number of users as a North Star metric. That's not what we're pursuing. We know how valuable battlefield situational awareness is. Seeing a blue dot on the map next to you, if you've not had that before, like, it's truly magical. It takes a lot of work to get there. It takes a lot of configuration of your kit to get there sometimes. But when you get to that point, when you show up to the Wildland Fire event, you show up to the engagement, if it's a kinetic engagement, you show up to the Joint Operations Center, the JOC, and you see dots moving on a map, not just plotted, but like dots moving that reflect people, that reflect drones, that reflect fixed wing aircraft, rotary wing, armored vehicles. And you see those formations actually come to life. It's magical. And we can help the DoD and all of our partner nations get there. We're doing our part to get there, but I think we need to see a lot more gas poured on the fire to see us truly realize a vision of joint and all domain situational awareness.
Yeah, I think you just did a great job at summarizing what most teams will need, but certainly you deserve it more than most other teams with the value you've been bringing to the table. And a lot of people on the chat and comments have been mentioning like the value that you guys have brought to life with such a little amount of money. So I wanted to thank you, of course, and thank Andrew. I'm going to bring you guys back on the screen here 1 second to give your last comment. Before we do that, I wanted to remind everybody that there won't be a show next Tuesday because I'm going to be in France. So I'm going to go see my family a little bit. So I'm going to be off next week, but I'll be back the week after. And we're going to have a great guest, Gary Bartlett. Gary Bartlett is the federal CTO at Illumio. So we're going to get to talk about zero trust, and we're going to debunk the zero trust nonsense on the show. So that's going to be interesting. And that's going to be next 2 weeks from now, Tuesday, 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Now over to Andrew to give us the parting words, and then over to Ryan.
Very good. Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed being on the show today. For any parting words, I would say if any of the things that I've mentioned today have interested you, and you're interested in getting a little more involved with the TAC Product Center, please do reach out, either via LinkedIn or the support@tac.gov email address, and kind of, let's have that conversation. I'm really interested to hear from you. So, but yeah, Nick, thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, Nick, this is a great forum, Nick. Thanks so much for inviting us onto your platform here. We've got really super pithy mission and vision statements. Our mission is to empower TAC users, and our vision is TAC continuous delivery. Visions and missions, of course, evolve over time, but that's where we are right now. Get the TAC products, use them, check them out, and figure out like how or if they work for you. Again, we're never going to come in and foist a product on somebody who doesn't have a utility for it, but whether it's the development platform and you're a developer, or whether you're a downstream user, program office fielding to users, the tech products are and always will be free. Make no bones about that. It's our job to figure out how to make sure that people can continue leveraging them, scaling them, implementing them in new and novel ways. But we see TAC as persisting. Like this is a capability that's going to live on for quite some time. And so this is a really good time to consider adopting it, whether that's in its a raw configuration or whether it's in a kind of a more exquisite variant with the military flavors. So TAC.gov, get an account. Anybody can get an account. If you're a developer in the DoD or U.S. government space, contractor or government, get in dev tools and come hang out with us in chat.tac.gov. It's our Mattermost server. Look forward to making connections with as many of you as we can.
Well, thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Ryan. It was very interesting. We learned a lot. You also demonstrated that a small group of people can get things done in the department. So I wanted to thank you and the team. Keep up the good work. Wanted to remind everybody, 2 weeks, Tuesday, 25th, next episode, 1 p.m. And subscribe to InTheNickOfTime.tv. And, of course, keep up the good fight and keep fighting so our kids have a fighting chance at winning against China 20 years from now. Stay safe, everybody. Thank you.